If you've been consuming any type of media in the last 2 decades, whether it's movies, TV shows, anime or video games, I'm sure you're familiar with these 2 words. The dead game where a large group of people is forced to kill each other until only one remains. But long before the likes of Squid Game and the Hunger Games, before Fortnite, PUBG or Danganronpa, there was an original battle for survival in Japan. And it all began with a 21-year-old journalist who had a twisted dream one day. In this mental image he saw a teacher grinning in front of the class and telling them today's assignment, to kill each other. This chilling contrast stayed with him for years, and he knew he had to explore this story. Little did he, or anyone he told about it, suspect how much of a cultural impact this simple premise would have in the decades to come. His name is Koushun Takami, the author of the best-selling 1999 novel Battle Royale, his only published novel to date. The rules are simple. On an island, 42 students have 3 days to fight until only one is left standing. They are each given a random weapon from a bag filled with survival tools and a collar around their necks that will explode if they try to escape or break the rules. With pistols, knives, sickles, stun guns, bow and arrow, or for the less fortunate ones with only a paper fan, binoculars or a pot lid. They have to strategize, cooperate, deceive or murder their classmates before the deadline. Like most things, even Takami's story had its predecessors. As he admitted, one of his favorites was Stephen King's The Long Walk, where a totalitarian government holds a deadly walking contest. And the name Battle Royale originally comes from pro wrestling, which Takami was a fan of. So in his mind, the entertaining concept of a series of fights filled with short-term alliances between unique characters until the last man standing started him on his path to write a masterpiece.
Battle Royale!
A story that was rejected from the 1997 Japan Horror Fiction Awards due to its violent themes about students murdering each other on a deserted island. Perhaps for exactly the controversy surrounding it after its release, the novel became a bestseller in Japan. This led to adaptations both as a 15-volume manga series that expands on the story and a film that eventually created an entire new subgenre. The movie version ended up on the table of director Kinji Fukasaku, who with his long background in Yakuza films knew how to approach the extreme violence of the source material. But Fukasaku's reason to make his version wasn't just the shocking image of a dark nightmarish teenage death game. Like the school kids in the story, Kinji Fukasaku was only 15 years old himself in 1945, during the last stretch of World War II, when he was forced to work in a munition factory along with his peers to support the deadly war machine of Imperial Japan. One day the factory was bombed, and while he was lucky, almost everyone else, including his best friend, perished that day in front of his eyes. From then on, Fukasaku held a grudge against adults and had a strong anti-authoritarian view for his whole life. And this is what Battle Royale is at its core. It's not a twisted game where people kill each other for entertainment or money, but the fight against the helplessness of a generation forced into misery by a higher power. The reaction to the traumas of the 20th century, a reminder that while anyone forced into a corner can turn into a deadly wild animal fighting for their survival, we have to prevent it in any way possible. Fukasaku's film adaptation stirred just as much controversy as Takami's novel did in the previous year, and even got an R15 rating in Japan, which meant no one under the age of 16 could watch it. Which is ironic, considering many of the actors were around that age during shooting. The director encouraged students to sneak into screenings, because in his eyes, it's a fable that can teach all of us something about the dark parts of our humanity, and even reflect on the growing youth crimes of Japan at the time. The clash with the government and stricter regulations around violent films, especially including underage characters, was partly due to the recent rise in crimes involving teenagers. Young biker gangs terrorizing civilians, a rising number of kids seeing their future in the Yakuza, and events such as the Kobe child murders, which were committed by a 14-year-old student, were all signs of deeper issues. In the 90s, Japan faced a big economic crisis, when the so-called bubble economy burst, and the image of a thriving country turned out to be built on lies. Trust between generations broke down. The older generation was blamed for corruption and mismanagement, while the younger generation was scapegoated for rising social issues. Millions lost their vision for the future. and Battle Royale served as a response to that. The film also faced issues globally, especially in the US, where it was not released officially for more than a decade, despite the great interest and praise it got from the limited screenings and bootleg copies circling in the early 2000s. I remember finding it in the early days of YouTube, when anything over 10 minutes was split into parts. My teenage eyes glued to the screen, clicking through parts of a poor quality copy with fan-made subtitles, when I barely knew any English, much less Japanese. Simple times. Despite the difficulties around its release and the issues with foreign distribution due to censorship, the movie was a financial success, and Battle Royale soon became a cultural phenomenon. The story depicts a time close to our own, but one where the youth is in revolt against the authority of adults. In the original novel and the manga, we are presented with a dystopian alternate universe where Germany and its ally Japan won World War II, becoming a totalitarian militaristic country called the Republic of Greater East Asia, where the Battle Royale Act is created. These two works, in contrast to the film, also contain much more explicit scenes of violence and sex, which were changed and toned down during the adaptation process. We are also introduced to a different head teacher who, while still murderous, is much less cruel and perverted. Fukasaku even changed his name to match the vision he saw for the teacher. That's how Sakamochi became Kitano.
Kitano!
Played by the director, actor and comedian Takeshi Kitano, who was simply asked to be himself.
Konnichiwa!
He reflects the film's central contrast, through his dark humor, subdued demeanor, and childlike behavior that can turn violent in an instant. That same tonal clash defines the film itself. Think of the cutesy government-produced guide to mass murder. Or announcing the names of the dead students every few hours, set to a calm, uplifting classical piece. It's a disturbing juxtaposition that captures the film's approach to violence, and one that later works like Squid Game clearly took inspiration from. In many ways, these comical, almost cartoonish moments and rough, unrealistic characterizations make Battle Royale much less serious and dangerous than many of its early critics claimed. The slogan on the original Japanese poster already hints at the strange and ridiculous contrast of innocent students being thrown into a game like this. This is beautifully reflected in the Lighthouse Scene, which according to Takami was inspired by John Carpenter's The Thing, where the protagonist Shuya finds himself being treated by some of the girls from his class after an injury. The lighthouse is the safe haven of these girls, who like many others try to survive together and not participate in the bloody game. But their pacifist system breaks down and ends up in a massacre when one of the girls tried to poison Shuya's lunch, only to end up killing one of her girlfriends. The trust that the lighthouse was built on is destroyed in a moment, and the doubts and fear take over. And one by one, they all end up in the void of the program. Just a few more names on the list, announced while munching on the homemade cookies of one of the students. While the depiction of violence is extreme, it's not focused on gore. Instead, it breaks down the human psyche when fear and instincts for survival take over. That's why it's often compared to Golding's Lord of the Flies, which shows how even kids are prone to building hierarchies and becoming cruel. Battle Royale is rough around the edges because it's not trying to be pedantic, preachy, or realistic. It accepts that the detailed exploration of more than 40 people is not feasible. So the characters become archetypes, often recognized by their weapons and outfit. The runner, the girl with the sickle, the mysterious psychopath, or in some cases they are handled in groups. The rebelling hacker group, the girls in the lighthouse, the bullies on the beach, the suicidal lovers, the pacifist pair with the megaphone, and the list goes on. It's a simple solution to a problem many filmmakers are facing when adapting a novel into a 2-hour movie. But even if they are on screen only for a few minutes, the movie is filled with iconic characters and scenes. No wonder Chiaki Kuriyama, the actress playing the sprinter Chigusa, was asked by Tarantino to play the young henchman Gogo in his Kill Bill films. A character who is clearly influenced by both Chigusa, along with the seductive and merciless killer Mitsuko. Battle Royale is often misunderstood, because it doesn't fit into the frame of any genre, especially when we think of how important its cultural background is, which doesn't always translate well. The trauma of the war, the atomic bombs, and the crisis of new generations in the latter half of the 20th century is ingrained in Japanese culture. The film has elements of campy horror and action flicks while reflecting on social issues and the inherent psychological aspects of humans. Like its pro wrestling namesake, Battle Royale is a spectacle where we, the viewers, have an unspoken agreement with the performers. We know it's not real, but we suspend our disbelief and play along. And if we buy into it, we get a chaotic carnival of mayhem from a weird and terrifying cast of characters, who all have their own backgrounds and battles and bonds, who love and destroy and shoot and slash through thick forests and desolate buildings, soaked in blood and rain, moving from zone to zone until there's nowhere else to escape the approaching hellfire. And the only choice you're left with is to kill your best friend or die by their hands.